This is The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World. West Alabama, how are we doing today on a Friday, the last day of May? Oh my gosh, cannot believe it's about to be June. Thanks so much to everybody who's tuned in watching us, whether you're watching us live or on replay, watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, or on Twitter, watching us on the Bama Central YouTube channel, or on my own social medias at Joe Gaither 6. We appreciate everybody who participates in the show. You can always subscribe and listen to the show if you'd like on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon as well. So we appreciate everybody who has done that, subscribed, rated, and reviewed the show on your favorite podcast platforms. Makes me feel really good and warm and fuzzy inside. We're going to have a busy Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun bouncing around on the Walsh Writing Network. We're going to start with Mississippi State football with our friend Jacob Bain. Then we're going to move over to Alabama baseball with our friends Will Miller and Kim Rankin as the Tallahassee Regional gets going. We might delve into a little bit of Alabama softball with that as the ladies unfortunately lost to UCLA, lost the opening game to UCLA in the Women's College World Series. So we'll touch on some of the Diamond sports with Will Miller and Kim Rankin, and then we'll finish with our friend Matt Guzman of Inside the Spurs. We'll talk about the NBA Finals being set, the NBA draft pool being set, and everything that goes along with it NBA-wise with Matt Guzman. As always, we want to get you to chime in on the show if you'd like on my Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Joe Gaither 6. If you want to comment on the show, you can send your comment, question, query, or complaint right there at Joe Gaither 6 on your favorite social media machine. With all that out the way, let's welcome in our friend Jacob Bain. Let me see. Oh, I got my Mississippi State slider right there. Yeah, we go. I almost had it right. That's the way I want it. Jacob Bain joins us from Cowbell Corner, part of the Walsh Writing Network, and you can follow him on the Twitter machine at Jacob Bain 10. What's going on, Jacob? How you doing? I think you're on mute. There we go. How's your Friday going?
It's going good. Yesterday wasn't as hot as it has been, so that was really good. Maybe today will be the same.
This is the same thing over here in Tuscaloosa. My dog looked at me like, oh, today's a little nicer. And I said, yeah, it's going all right. It was a beautiful day yesterday in Tuscaloosa. Hope it was the same over in Starkville for you, sir. Just right off the bat, Mississippi State, I mean, it is baseball season. Mississippi State, y'all got a 2 seed, right?
Yes, sir.
What regional did you get sent out to? Because last week we talked mostly baseball with you guys.
They're the 2 seed in Virginia. They take on St. John's tonight at 6 o'clock Central.
All right, we'll be paying attention to that on Cowbell Corner, seeing if they can get out of the Virginia Regional. A little bit of a shaft there, but we talked about that last week, and we'll talk more baseball regionals with Kim Rankin and Will Miller on the Alabama side of things. I wanted to bring you back, Jacob Bain, because I want to talk some spring football with you. It's an exciting time in Starkville. Obviously, you dumped Zach Arnett, the incompetent Zach Arnett, after what, 5-7 or 4-7? 5-7.
Fired him for the last game.
Okay. Yeah, well, smart. 4-7. They finished 5-7 last year. So what's the spring been like? Hiring Jeff Levy, you got Coleman Hutzler in as defensive coordinator. The Alabama fans are kind of familiar with that, but just kind of what's the general vibe? We'll start right there, nice and easy. The vibe for Mississippi State this spring.
The vibe was good. I think there was more positive momentum gained on the recruiting trail, just picking guys up out of the transfer portal, especially on offense. He had to rebuild a lot on offense and he did a good job by signing some quality offensive linemen and receivers and a quarterback. But I'd say the vibe is really good right now. The spring game went really well in terms of offensive production and big plays and stuff like that. And so I think people are excited for that.
Well, tell us about what you think about Coleman Hutzler, because that's where we'll start from the Alabama angle, merging Alabama and Mississippi State together. You take the outside linebacker coach from Alabama. He gets a raise. This will be his first defensive coordinator job in the SEC. What kind of a system is he going to be running over in Starkville?
Yeah, we didn't get to talk to him none during the spring sessions, but during the spring game, it was some multiple looks, mostly 3-4, and I would be lying if I told you I knew a whole lot about him. I think at Alabama, they don't let under Saban, they didn't let assistant coaches speak to the media.
No.
Yeah, there's not much to know about him. They didn't do very well in the transfer portal, but obviously that's going to happen with the new staff. But I mean, if he worked under Nick Saban and he's worked in South Carolina, at Texas, all throughout the SEC at Ole Miss, he's got to be he's got to be experienced play caller. But he's not very. But it's exciting.
Okay. So we're talking about Mississippi State with our friend Jacob Bain. You can follow him at Jacob Bain 10 on the Twitter machine and read all of his great coverage on the Walsh Writing Network on cowbellcorner.com. Let's go into Jeff Lebby, the offensive mind. Basically, he's come from Oklahoma. He's played. He's kind of been under the Josh Heupel tree. You're getting a revamp on the offensive side. Zach Arnett. Oh my gosh. Well, first, let's actually back up. Zach Arnett takes the air raid, takes Mike Leach's air raid and says, we've got all the personnel to keep running this air raid, but we're throwing it out. And they kind of went in a pro-style direction, pretty much upended the entire offense. Is there excitement moving back into the spread system, or do you think it's going to work out better with the personnel already in place, or third offense in 3 years might be a problem in Starkville?
Yeah, I think it's exciting to go back to a more modernized offense. The air raid, it wasn't exactly modernized under Leach. It was still very, old school. But I mean, the decision in hindsight didn't look good. But Arnett changing offensive schemes made sense on paper, kind of, because the offense did struggle at times under Leach. But I mentioned in the article, I think the biggest issue was trying to run a pro style scheme with Will Rogers, who he was just ran the air raid in high school and all throughout his career. So he was perfect for that offense, and they shouldn't have changed it. If they wanted to change it, they should try to get a better quarterback than Will. But I think people were excited for the spread offense. Just exciting offense. There hadn't been an exciting offense in Starkville since maybe when Dak was here. That's probably the last time the offense was really exciting under Dan Mullen, and they've had 3 head coaches since then. So,
well, you went out and you kind of highlighted this. You went out into the transfer portal, and I'm seeing from our friends at 24/7 Sports 19 total incoming transfers. We'll just start with the quarterback, Blake Sheppin, because I'm looking at ourlads.com. That's where I get kind of my depth charts. And they got Blake Sheppin, the transfer from Baylor, slated to start with Chris Parson as basically their backup. What do you think about Blake Sheppin? What did you see from him in the spring game? And let's just big picture in the SEC. I mean, you've got a lot of really good quarterbacks in the league this year. Can Blake Sheppin stack up amongst the best in the SEC?
Among the best, I don't know. There's some really good ones. There's Milroe, Ewers, Dart. I don't know if and Carson Beck, but if he can fit into that middle tier, I think that'd be fine because he's got good weapons, and Kelly Akari and Kevin Coleman, who they got out of the transfer portal. But during the spring game, man, he looked good. He had a big arm, can make every throw on the field. He's athletic, can move around the pocket, and every time Lebby talks about Shaping, he'll tell you that he was exactly what he was looking for in the transfer portal. When State signed him, it kind of went not under the radar, but there was still hope that maybe Dylan Gabriel, because the Oklahoma connection with Lebby, maybe he could come to Starkville. But Chapin, I think he will be fine for him. He's experienced, won a Big 12 title in 2021, and the first year just you need to take it with a grain of salt probably, because it's not going to always look great, especially with the tough schedule they have. But I think he will be a middle-of-the-road quarterback in the SEC, which is fine for the first year under Lebby.
All right, so you're still getting to know Jeff Lebby, but oftentimes I hear coaches, or especially right here in Tuscaloosa, you'd hear Nick Saban say, "Oh, this guy's great. Oh, this guy's doing good. Oh, yada, yada." Basically, filling him up with praise. And sometimes I'd walk away, Jacob, thinking, "Oh, I don't believe him." Do you believe Jeff Lebby when he says, "Oh, this is exactly who I was looking for in the transfer portal"?
Well, It's kind of tough to say. I don't want to call him a liar, but
No,
I mean,
but do you believe it's opinion? It's an opinion question.
yeah, I think he got what he wanted in terms of experience and the Power Five or the Power Four now, and I think that's what he really would have wanted out of the portal because they had Chris Parson, who's a freshman, a talented freshman, but he's still young. So I think he wanted an experienced guy out of the portal, and he played against him when he was at Oklahoma when Chapin was at Baylor. So he's obviously seen him up close and personal, and but I mean, he's got all the tools necessary to run this offense. A big arm, and he's athletic and can move around. And all that.
All right, so let's talk about some news that hit the basically our Twitters and social medias yesterday. Egg Bowl moving off Thanksgiving night. Look, we talked just a little bit the last time you were on about how much I do love the Egg Bowl, and I think it's a very underrated rivalry in the SEC. But it's moving off of Thanksgiving night. Did I see Black Friday is the new home for the Egg Bowl? How does the Starkville faithful feel, and what do you think the impact it will be on moving from Thanksgiving night to Black Friday?
Personally, I prefer it on Thanksgiving night just because it's always, in my lifetime anyway, most of the time it's always been on Thanksgiving Day. But in terms of viewership and it's growing the rivalry, I think it was good putting on Black Friday. It's at 2:30 Central on ABC, so prime time on Friday. Nobody's at work, and get more eyeballs on the game and all that stuff. But I prefer it on Thanksgiving Day, but I think it was a good move moving it to Friday. You get more eyeballs and all that, and but I think it'll grow the rivalry as a whole. You don't have to compete with the NFL and all that on Thanksgiving.
That was what I was going to say. I think it's very tough to steal eyes away from the National Football League. I know my Bears and Lions are playing the traditional early game this year on Thanksgiving. By the time I get to the evening portion of my Thanksgiving, I'm ready to go to bed because I've eaten so much. And I got no interest. I mean, I don't know you very well, Jacob, but I got no interest in going out and fighting the Black Friday shopping crowds. I'm going to enjoy eating leftovers and taking in some Egg Bowl.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's good for the viewership, but it will definitely help the viewership. They ain't got to compete with the NFL. I think they moved Georgia and Georgia Tech to Black Friday as well, which I like that. That game kind of always gets buried at 11 a.m. on Saturday when Ohio State, Michigan are playing. So I think it's good for rivalry week as a whole to kind of spread it out a little bit and not jamming all together on Thursday and Saturday.
SEC All Conference. Let me see this real quick. I'm pulling up a little SEC All Conference from 2023. Scrolling through. Did Mississippi State have any representatives last year? Nathaniel Watson, linebackers listed here.
Jet Johnson, maybe.
And we're scrolling on through. Maybe a second teamer. Oh my gosh! How about what would be helpful? State. Control F State. Nope. It is just Nathaniel Watson is the only all-conference player last year. So who is going to be the guy to watch this coming up season that could make an all-conference team?
I'll give you an offensive guy and a defensive guy. The offensive guy, I would say, is from the transfer portal. And if State's going to have a first-round pick in the NFL draft, it would be this guy. It's McCallan Pounders. He's a tackle from Memphis. His recruiting story is well documented, was committed to State for a long time, flipped to Ole Miss, and on signing day, kind of got the rug pulled out from under him, and he ended up in Memphis. He had a couple of good years there, and now he's back in Starkville. But I think he's taking over that left tackle spot, and he could be an all-conference guy and potentially a first-round pick. And on defense, there's just not a lot of experience there, and so I got to kind of go off a recruiting profile. But maybe Travion Williams and the defensive lineman. He was a 4-star when he came out. He's battled with injuries. He's a redshirt sophomore now, but Mississippi State's had success with defensive linemen in the past, and they got good defensive line coach David Turner. And Travion, he looks the part for sure. Saw him during the spring. He looks the part. But if I had to guess about all conference players, I would say on offense, McCallan Pounders, and defense, Travion Williams.
All right, so we're getting excited about Mississippi State football with Jacob Bain of Cowbell Corner. You guys can follow him on the Twitter machine at Jacob Bain 10, a part of the Walsh Writing Network. Let's talk about this schedule a little bit. We'll have you on next week, and we'll pick wins and losses. We'll go all the way through wins and losses. You mentioned tough schedule. I've got it pulled up at Texas, at Georgia, at Tennessee. They didn't do Mississippi State any favors with the reshuffling and adding Texas and Oklahoma and kind of merging the East and West. This schedule looks like a beast, man. What is one or two games that you think you're most excited for in 2024?
Yeah, this schedule is brutal. State fans were excited to finally get Alabama off the schedule,
Exactly.
And they reward you with, you get to take the trip to Athens. So, but a couple games I think you could watch is Florida, week 4. They play Eastern Kentucky, Toledo, Arizona State the first 3 weeks. They could easily start off 3-0 in those games. And Florida is the SEC opener at home. Florida, they got their own issues with Billy Napier, a lawsuit now coming from your rival quarterback. So they got their own issues, and it'll be the home SEC opener for Levy. And I think if State could get off to a 4-0 start, it would really build a lot of national excitement and definitely some excitement around Starkville. And another game I would say would probably be Texas A&M at home, because State's just trying to get back to 6 or 7 wins, and the road schedule is brutal. I personally don't see them winning a single SEC road game, not because I don't think they're just all that great, but they go to Ole Miss, to Tennessee, to Texas, to Georgia. All 4 of those teams could be top 10 teams by the time the season's over. But A&M and Florida are a couple games that if State could win, they could have a 6-7 win season, which would be a great season under Levy in his first year.
All right, so my man Stingray, and you can listen to Stingray on Tide 100.9 in the evenings. He's a big Mississippi State guy as well, and he's highlighting this Mississippi State at Arizona game on the Facebook comments. You guys can join the Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube comments at Joe Gaither 6 if you'd like. So let's talk about it. Last year, you bring Arizona into Starkville, and you have kind of a wild game, really. Overtime game, you win 31-24 in overtime. How big is it now you're not going back out there to Arizona, University of Arizona, to play the Wildcats. You're playing the Sun Devils. They obviously have the documented kind of history with Jaden Rashada, and they're having some issues as well. How big is it? You said, let's get to Mississippi State wants to get off to a 4-0 start. That second week out at Arizona State, that's going to be a huge matchup.
Oh, yeah. It's a 9:30 local time here in Starkville kickoff. So
Gross.
I would say Pac-12 After the Dark, but Pac-12 After the Dark no longer exists. But it's a key matchup just because it's a Power 5 opponent. But Arizona State, I mean, they aren't a powerhouse or anything like that. But it's always tough to go on the road, especially out to Arizona. And but I think State could definitely win that game. It will be tough, and they beat Arizona twice. Last year they beat Arizona, and fans were upset because it was close. But looking back on it, it was a really good win because Arizona, a 10-win team, and really did really well in the Pac-12. But Arizona State is a key game. I kind of assume State will win, but you can't really assume they'll win. It's a Power 5 opponent. They have talented players, and it will be at Arizona, which will be tough for them to adjust to. But yeah, I think it's a key matchup for Levy and them, but I think they can take it for sure.
All right, let's get you out of here on this, Jacob. Mississippi State, obviously, in the Virginia regional. You got Virginia, Mississippi State, St. John's, and Penn over there in the Charlottesville regional. What's the key to Mississippi State getting out of Virginia and getting to the Super Regionals this weekend in the NCAA baseball tournament?
Well, the key to any regional is always pitching, but I feel confident in State's pitching. They got Cal Stephen pitching the 9th or 8th. I'm assuming Translow Sancho will go game 2. But the key thing for them is you got to get Dakota Jordan on her irons going. They batted in the 3 and 4 hole all year for State, and they've been inconsistent at times, but especially the last couple of weeks. They had 4 games in Hoover. They had to combine 1 hit and 2 RBIs down there in Hoover. I mean, they were just non-productive outs. So those 2 guys have got to get it going. I mean, They can't be automatic outs in the middle of the lineup, especially with how talented they are. They could easily carry this team deep into the postseason, or they could lose 2 games in a row because they don't do nothing. But they're the key for the getting out of this regional.
That was Jacob Bain joining us on the Joe Gaither Show, part of the Walsh Writing Network. Jacob's got a big day today and really the whole weekend, hopefully from the state perspective, covering Mississippi State's baseball regional over there in Virginia. You can read all his coverage on cowbellcorner.com. Jacob, next week we're going to go by the schedule, wins and loss. So go through your football schedule and scratch up W's and L's, and we'll compare notes next week. Thanks for your time, man.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. That's Jacob Bain joining us. We are going to keep the program rolling, keep the party rolling, and flip it to Alabama sports with our friends Will Miller and Kim Rankin. We're going to talk Alabama regional. Oh, no, we don't like that setup. We like that setup a little better. We like that setup the best right there on the visual side. You can follow our friends Kim Rankin and Will Miller on the social media machines at Kim Rankin1 and Real WB Miller. They're going to be very, very busy starting in about an hour and change. Alabama baseball down in Tallahassee, taking on Florida State, UCF, and Stetson. Guys, how we doing today, Kim? How's your day going so far?
Yeah, my day's going pretty good. Just watching a little bit of the Florida State Stetson game in the Tallahassee Regional. Florida State was up 3-1 in the 5th last time I saw it. So just watching some baseball, getting ready for Alabama to play tonight.
Will Miller, you having a good week so far?
Yes, sir. It's tournament time and lots of eyes on that Florida State Stetson game because that's who the winner of Alabama versus UCF at 5 p.m. tonight will get in the all-important 1-0 game in the regional. And that's exactly where you want to be no matter whether you're the number 4 seed or the number 1 seed, which those two are doing battle right now. So lots to keep an eye on. It's already underway, lots to be excited about.
All right, so let's start with you, Will Miller, because you've got our cover right there on BamaCentral.com. Make sure you go read Will Miller's piece this morning on BamaCentral.com. Freshman Alabama shortstop Justin LeBron reflects ahead of first NCAA tournament. Will Miller, don't give everything away, but what are some of the sneaky highlights? What are some of your favorite aspects about your story and your time with Justin LeBron?
Well, Joe, this guy has been given the really tough task of not only playing one of the most challenging positions on the entire field, but replacing a guy who, by most accounts, is a program icon in Jim Jarvis. And I touched on that a little bit in the piece I did. And he's been up to the challenge. He looks grown up out there. I mean, I think that this season, I think that'll do it to you when you're, no matter, how young you are when you're in the SEC and you're playing 30 SEC games and change. It'll grow you up a little bit. But his glove's really sharp. His bat's right up there, 3rd on the team in home runs, hit double-digit home runs. Just a really solid all-around player and a team guy that seems to be bought into this mindset that the coaching staff has instilled in these players. I mean, the upside is really, really good.
All right, Kim Rankin, I hear talented freshman in the infield who plays really, really well, and I automatically think about Colby Shelton transferring out of Alabama, going to Florida. Can Alabama, no matter what happens in the results this weekend, next weekend, wherever the run ends, national championship or this weekend, anywhere in between, can Alabama keep Justin LeBron in the fold for his sophomore season?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think they can. I think, he gets along with the team really well. I feel like this team chemistry is very, very high. He really seems like every time we talk to him, every time we see him on the field, he seems like he really loves this group. He really loves Coach Vaughn. I know in press conferences where we've had him post-game, he's talked a lot about how much he loves Coach Vaughn and really likes what he's doing. So I think there's a high chance they keep him this offseason no matter how Alabama finishes.
Well, I'm thinking more NIL and dollars from that standpoint. Because Colby, I think – correct me if I'm wrong, you covered the baseball team last year, and I think for the last 2 years, Colby was all in on the program as well, but when it came time for the rubber to meet the road, it seemed like the dollars and cents made a lot more influence, which you can't blame him. I don't blame him at all. Alabama, is Justin LeBron going to be motivated by money, or can Alabama pony some up? Do you think that's a worry for Alabama, or am I being irrational?
I mean, I think that's always a worry, no matter what team or player you're thinking about with this, day and age of NIL, where anybody can really, get more money from other schools. I think Alabama has a lot to work on with their baseball, especially their baseball NIL program, but their NIL program in general. But I think if, they make it far enough, players might be getting like higher. I think it depends on how good your program is and how big the dynasty is. Obviously Florida's been a big baseball dynasty. So I think that helps a lot. And I also feel like it's kind of, I don't know if last year is the best year to really like judge because of everything that happened with, Brad Bohannon, Jason Jackson, the whole thing. So, people could have left for NIL and they could have left for many other reasons. I think that's I think that's the one year you should probably omit from the comparison to NIL, but he might have left for NIL. We never really know. But yeah, I mean, I think that's always an issue. But I think if a player really wants to up their drafts, it just depends on if he wants to up his draft stock, if he wants to stay with the team he loves, or if he wants to go for money. He doesn't seem to me like the type who would leave for a lot more money. But, you never know with players. But I think there's a high chance he stays and doesn't enter the portal next year.
All right, Will Miller, we're going to go back to you because Alabama baseball starts at 3 p.m. today against UCF. Big matchup. As you said, you want to get off to 1-0. We saw the starting pitcher is going to be Greg Ferrone. Last time he out on the Tuesday, the three of us were in the press box, and he went, 2 innings and change. And really, I mean, yeah, good first inning, but kind of started the slide. They gave up 6 runs in that third inning. What are we going to see out of Greg Ferrone today?
I think he's got to do what he's done most of the season. This is a guy that's kind of followed the new tradition, so to speak, of Alabama baseball pitchers, where you get one guy that just comes out of the midweek and starts dealing, and that ends up being in pole position in that pitching rotation. And that's Greg Ferrone this year. And what a time for it with all these injuries this team has had. I've talked about it a lot. But he's just got to do what he's done for most of this year. He attacks hitters. If there's a guy out there who struggles against lefties, that's a plus because Ferrone is a southpaw. He does have that Power 5 experience of formerly being at Louisville, which is a really good baseball program as well. Obviously, the coaching staff likes him. I mean, you like anybody that's going to eat innings for you at a really high level, right? But just keep doing that. Keep attacking hitters. The biggest thing for him is going to be to limit that pitch count. South Carolina made him work. The last couple teams he faced have made him work. Auburn made him work when they won that series against Alabama to end the regular season out on a sour note for the Crimson Tide. Auburn at the bottom of the league standings didn't really matter to them. So those are the keys for him. Be economic and attack that zone, and he will have a lot of success. He's had a lot of success all year. And that's what he needs to continue to do. And they need to get every bit of production out of the pitching that they can because, ideally you want to go 3-0 in a regional. That's a tough ask. Alabama did it last year. But and last year there was a bit of offense bailing them out. That can absolutely happen this year because this is a really talented batting lineup. But you don't want to be solely relying on one or the other. And that's what having a guy like Greg Ferrone starting game one gives you the opportunity to be in that position if he plays well.
All right, Kim Rankin, on Tuesday when we were all together, I commented maybe once, maybe 10 times that it looks like Alabama's arms are out of gas. With Greg Ferrone aside, if Alabama's able to win against UCF today, that's the ideal result for the number 2 seed beats the number 3 seed. That's just kind of, what the paper says. What's the status of the starters going forward? What's the health and how much gas does this team have? Is it just a big positive that they got 10 days off, or are they just kind of patchwork society the rest of the way?
Yeah, so I think that's probably the good thing about exiting the SEC tournament early and having a week and a half of rest before your regional is that every arm is going to be fully rested, good to go for not only tonight, but also this weekend. I think if Greg Ferrone and all the other starters, Zane Adams, Ben Hess, and possibly Kate Snell, depending on, what they do, if they have to make it to 4 or 5 games, I think that having them go long innings is really going to help, and you really don't need to wear out the bullpen, because I feel like the arms have been fairly consistent. I know Greg Ferrone and Zane Adams have been very consistent. Ben Hess has kind of been shaky. He was really good at the beginning of the season, struggled in like the first 2/3 of the SEC play, and then looked really good ever since that Mississippi State outing, and has been pretty consistently good ever since. Didn't get to see him in Hoover. But I feel like as long as those guys, especially because every single pitcher except maybe Kate Snell has shown you that they can go at least 100 pitches, pitch 6, 7, 8 innings. I know Zane Adams has pitched 8 innings. I think Ferrone's pitched close to 8 before. Ben Hess has pitched 7 already this season. So like they've shown that they can go long innings, and as long as they can be consistent and do that, and you don't have to really burn your bullpen, because I feel like a lot of these Alabama games this season has been the bullpen breakdown, the bullpen struggle, more than really the starters. So I think as long as you don't have to throw out 5, 6 arms each game, they'll be fine, assuming throughout the weekend and assuming they advance to next weekend.
All right, so let's talk about the other 3 teams down there in Tallahassee. Because I'm, myopic right here in Northport, looking at Alabama. I saw Alabama in the fall, Will Miller, against Florida State. I got the privilege to be there for BamaCentral.com. It was great, but fall ball is not real per se. It's scrimmages, and yes, Alabama acquitted themselves, played well in the doubleheader fall ball games against Florida State. But obviously, they're the number 1 team in the regional for a reason, had a strong season. What do we know about Florida State? Kim, I'm going to have you tell us about UCF, and we might go all 3 together on Stetson.
Well, Joe, one thing I would touch on with Florida State is obviously we know this is a blue blood in college baseball, has had a lot of success for, a long, since before anybody here has been around. And Link Jarrett has done a heck of a job this year getting them back to some semblance of that after being hired from Notre Dame, where he led them to a College World Series berth 2 years ago, knocked off Tennessee in the Supers, that Tennessee team that just I maintain to this day was so much better than everybody. And Notre Dame beat them. But Link Jarrett was given the job at Florida State. It's close to the heart for him, and he really ran with it this season. 42 wins, coveted top 8 national seed, get to host both the rounds pre-Omaha, if it comes to that, if Florida State's able to come out of this regional, that's one of the implications. But this is just a really good team and a really good league. The ACC absolutely stacked this year. You have North Carolina, who's really good, Duke, who's really good over in the other regional, paired with this side in the bracket over in Norman, Oklahoma. Clemson, who's really good. A lot of people think they're going to end up in Omaha. I mean, and this team has just played well all year long. They had that, absolutely torrential undefeated start where they were just inconceivably not ranked for a good chunk of that earlier this season. They've got really good pitching. They got really good hitting. They've got pitchers that can go deep into games as well. Kim talked about how important that is. A really, really solid team. I mean, and I've said this, you don't host a regional for no reason, but you don't win 40 games for no reason either. And this team's done both. Great job by Link Jarrett. Great job by the players. But it's tough sledding in the postseason. That you get an SEC team in the regional. That's the toughest league in college baseball. I mean, North Carolina in particular is probably pretty mad because they drew LSU. But if you get an SEC team in your regional, you've always got to be watching your back.
All right, so there's Florida State. Obviously, they're hosting the regional for a reason. Kim, what can we expect today at 3:00 with the UCF Knights?
Yeah, I think UCF is very similar to Alabama this year. They only lost 19 games this season. They finished 8th in the Big 12 regular season. Had a little momentum in the Big 12 tournament, though. They lost the semifinal and finished basically 3rd in the tournament to Oklahoma State. Made it pretty far. But they're very evenly matched. Alabama and UCF have played each other 13 times all time, or this will be the 13th time, and they're 6-6 each. So completely even on the board. UCF is a team that can really do good. I know they're undefeated. They've played 2 games against ACC and SEC opponents in the regular season and won both of them. But they don't have a lot of experience in neutral site this year. They're 2-1. So we'll have to see. But this is also their first regional appearance since 2017. So I think the big thing with UCF is they're just going to see how bad they want it. If they want to prove like, hey, we haven't been here in a long time. Let's see if we can, make a run. But I think they're very evenly matched. And I think it's going to be a really, really tight game.
and I'm looking through the Stetson schedule, I'm seeing, okay, they've got a lot of familiarity, a little bit of familiarity with some of these teams in the regional. They're 1-1 against the University of Florida. They lost to Georgia. They lost a close game to Florida State at Florida State already. They lost to UCF for 7-1 in midweeks, but they are the ASUN tournament champions. What's Stetson? How dangerous are Stetson in this regional? Will or Kim, whoever wants to chime in there.
Yeah,
well, that would have been a really different question 6 years ago. When
Didn't
Stetson
Alabama play
hosted
Stetson 2 years ago?
I don't
2 or
know.
3?
It hasn't been any time since I've been here, which was
Okay.
since the 2022 season. But Stetson another 40-game winner, and again, you don't win 40 games for no reason. The Atlantic Sun is a sneaky good mid-major league in diamond sports, and it's my feeling that this regional, that you have a lot of common opponents here. Beating Florida means a lot less than it did last year, or probably will in the future. Florida right there at above that 500 line. But Stetson's got to have things go right. They're the number 4 seed. They're tasked with opening things up against Florida State. But who knows what happens once you get to that 1-0 game, and that's what Stetson's trying to do right now.
Kim, what's the score? What do you have the score at Stetson and Florida State at the moment?
Let me see if I can find it. It was 3-1, but let me see if there is something that will tell me.
Oh, Florida State. I can pull it up right here. State, Stetson. Oh, baseball. Yeah, it's still 3-1. It was 5-2. It's 5-2 in the 7th inning. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on the rest of the day. You'll want to follow Bama Central for the regional coverage. You'll get live updates probably about 2:30, 2 o'clock or so, as we're going to watch and see if Alabama can get to the 1-0 game. Let's talk about it. Alabama being a 2 seed. As the season wore on, it became apparent that, okay, hosting a regional is probably going to be out. The last week or so in the year, obviously, you lost to Auburn in that regular season series, and then you lost on day 1 of the SEC tournament. And D1 baseball and Baseball America, a lot of them were having Alabama as a 3 seed. And then tournament brackets come out on Monday, Selection Monday. Kim Rankin, were you surprised that Alabama held a 2 seed? Why were they given the 2 seed despite maybe the poorer finish to the year?
Yeah, I was surprised. I think most people were surprised they were a 2 seed. Alabama had been projected to be a 2 seed since preseason all the way up until that series against Auburn. And then after that, they dropped to the 3 seed and kind of maintained a 3 seed projection all through the SEC tournament. So it was a little surprising, but I think what really got Alabama that 2 seed, one, was the quality of wins. You've got series wins against Tennessee, Arkansas, you've won against Arizona, you've won against Texas A&M, you've played one of the most top 25 games this season. So very impressive quality, very hard strength of schedule. And I really feel like that's kind of what put them at the 2 seed. I also feel like once the top 16 were kind of determined, it really looked like the committee took a lot of proximity and location into some of these seedings. So I think that helped a lot too, that Alabama is only 5 to 6 hours from Tallahassee. So it's really not that bad of a drive. And I think they took a lot of that into consideration, not only for Alabama, but for a lot of these regional teams this year. My personal opinion, I thought there was more location in a lot of these than most prior seasons. So I think that was a big factor too.
All right, Will Miller, was there a little Bama bias, SEC bias as to why Alabama got the 2 seed?
There was some bias in the selection process. It didn't come from Alabama. Alabama, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have a guy in the room, and that proved to matter, in this tournament. When you saw teams right there on the bubble, I'll use an example. Troy didn't get in. And you saw Coastal Carolina from that same conference that has an AD in the room get in. I do think Troy is tournament good, Joe. I think they're good enough to play in this tournament. East Carolina getting a hosting bid, and Mississippi State or Indiana State, take your pick. One of those two getting bumped off for East Carolina to host. Their athletic directors in the room. I think Alabama was, the committee stated they looked at series wins more so than individual wins. Does Alabama have really good individual wins? Absolutely. They got wins over Indiana. They got wins over Arizona. That was during the Frisco Classic in the early season. They do have wins over Troy. They got 2 of those. One of them on the road while Troy was ranked. And what became the William Hamiter legacy 2 weeks. But that was one of the finest hours of that with his 2 home run day that game. You look at the series wins, you look at 3 of the top 4 SEC teams in the bracket, and Alabama has at least one win over all of those 3 out of the 4 teams. They got a series win over the top 2 seeds. I think that pushed them over the edge. I was talking to my dad, and he suggested to me that if the regional was held equal, it almost makes no material difference if you're a 2 seed or a 3 seed. And I think there's some degree of accuracy to that. But nevertheless, it's Alabama getting rewarded for playing that tough schedule. And, it didn't always go Alabama's way, sometimes in more ways than one. I don't know how many times you game plan for serious food poisoning, for example. But ultimately, when all is said and done, they're right there on that line. And I think, again, it's just a reflection of not only who they played, but those wins that they were able to get.
All right, we're hanging out with Kim Rankin and Will Miller on the Joe Gaither Show, the 2 baseball experts for us at Bama Central and BamaCentral.com. You can follow him at Kim Rankin1 and Real WB Miller. Kim, I'm going to toss this to you. I'm playing off of a conversation we had yesterday with Blake Byler about separating the Alabama football brain from every other sport brain. We remember Alabama football national championship or bust for the last 10 years. Oh, if you're not winning a title, then you stink. Then you're no good. Rob Vaughn, you're number 1. Of course, it's no good to be one and done in the SEC tournament. He kind of touched on that last week that he wanted to stay in Hoover a bit longer. But a lot of adversity, obviously, from last season to this year. Lots of turnover. And now here you are playing as a 2 seed in the Tallahassee Regional. What's your encapsulation of Rob Vaughn's year 1?
Yeah, I think Rob Vaughn has done a very good job. I feel like, with that kind of brain, and especially what happened last year after Brad Bohannon got fired, Jason Jackson got them to a top 16 seed to host a regional and then made it to the Supers, went 2-2 in the SEC tournament last year. I feel like and I feel like this happens with every Alabama sport. It's not just baseball, not just football, not just basketball, but there's a standard to being an Alabama fan in Alabama sports, especially when you see success maybe a year or 2 prior. And you're like, oh, well, they'll obviously do that next year. But Alabama baseball lost a majority of their team last year and only really had one everyday starter come back in Matt Usetti. Bryce Edlin and Will Hodo got starts last year, but they weren't everyday starters. Those 2 positions kind of got moved to this year. So Rob Vaughn really came in with not a lot to work with. He's a 36-year-old head coach in the SEC, first year in the SEC. I think he's done a fine job for what he was given, how he handled it, and really with just how young he is in coaching. I mean, he's obviously going to make mistakes. There were some, especially thinking about the SEC tournament and their pitching decisions. He's going to make mistakes. He's not going to be perfect. He's talked about that a lot in post-game press conferences too, how he'll make mistakes. He's human. He might think something's right and it might, blow up in his face. But I think overall what he's done, I mean, he got them to a 2 seed in a regional. They're going to regionals for back-to-back for the first time since I think 2013-14. 2 seed. SEC tournament appearance, number 7, which was the highest they've been since 2014 in the SEC tournament seeding. I think he's done a fine job considering this is his first year.
There we go. All right. Well, let's go back to William Hamiter real quick. Obviously, you touched on the start of his terror against Troy. I'm having a hard time because I'm getting 404 on RollTide.com. How many games is his hitting streak up to? Is it 10? Is that what I remember? And
it's 10. It's up to 10 right now, yeah.
How can he keep it going?
Yeah, it's up to 10. I mean, he struggled to start this year. He didn't really, he didn't get a ton of starts. He'd get pinch hit appearances. He'd come off the bench. And, I mean, it's difficult when you look back to kind of, really analyze that because – I think, another discussion I was having with my dad who said that William would probably tell you these are the results he expects if he's getting, multiple at-bats every single day. He's getting into more of a routine. I think that piece is there as well. And that's another way that, the rest might be doing more harm than good. Who knows if the guys that were hitting the ball well, maybe they're going to have to, dig in a couple of times in order to get back to that. And when every pitch counts, every opportunity counts, who knows if there's room to spare for that. But this is a guy who's in his last year of playing baseball, and like a lot of people, he's dealt with his share of difficulties. 2 years ago, breaking his foot and being out for
Jaguar.
a number of months. Say again.
Northridge Jaguar wanting to make his mark on the program.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you'll see those tweets a lot from my good friend Andy Hayes, in case you needed reminding. But is a Tuscaloosa kid, and trying to make he really sounds like he's just trying to make the most out of whatever this last run is going to be. And go figure, he's done a heck of a job. He's been getting starts in right field ever since that food poisoning epidemic in Starkville took down Evan Slight, who was the everyday right fielder. And I mean, he's hit the ball so well that even Evan Slight himself is like, you've got to play him. Coach Vaughn talked to us about that a few weeks ago, and he hasn't looked back. 10-game hitting streak and almost exclusively SEC play, because they really haven't been doing midweek since that Troy game. Is nothing to sneeze at.
Oh, I lost my train of thought real quick. Oh no, yeah, okay, I got it. I lost my train of thought. And I got it right back. Didn't an ACA kid just commit to Alabama this weekend or this week? Do we know anything about him?
He did.
I know more about him for football than baseball. I don't really know how he does.
Tell us. That's fine.
Eric Hines. He's an ACA. He plays football and baseball. At least he might play basketball too. I don't know, but he's a multi-sport athlete at ACA. I've covered him mostly for football. But yeah, he just committed to the Alabama baseball program for the class of 25, I want to say. So that's awesome to get these local guys. I know Alabama has a couple of local guys. I think there's a TA guy whose name I can't think of off the top of my head, but they've got a couple local guys here and there that don't really get a lot of starts, but are on the roster for the baseball team. So I just love seeing these like local guys who really like embrace Tuscaloosa. And William Hamner, like Will said, talked about it, how much he loves the city, how that was kind of his decision. He, didn't really know if he was going to come back next year. And Rob Vaughn talked about it too. And, Will Hammer is kind of working on his MBA right now. So he didn't really get a lot of practice in, but they're just trying to, savor every moment, because it is his hometown. It's where he grew up. You've got all the local guys. So I love seeing just personally these local guys come in and really just embrace the Alabama baseball culture and kind of get it going. So that's always really fun to see. So I hope Eric Hines, when he does show up in 25, does really, really good for the program.
Will, anything you want to add on our next local star?
Yeah, this kid's got a really good build. I mean, you talk about freshmen having to grow up, not only maturity-wise, but physically too. And Joe, you and I, obviously being Fight fans, you have the same discussion about, 20-somethings in a certain weight class that you think eventually they're going to get to a bigger weight class somewhere down the line. You got Dustin Poirier fighting this weekend, who used to be at the weight class lower than he is now, for example. But this kid is not small, and you expect that, right? He plays football. They got, and I'm sure they've got great programs over there at ACA. I mean, that program's no joke. But when you talk about getting a guy in there that's not only got that kind of experience, but that you don't got to worry about building him up physically. I mean that's huge. You give him a bat and you can expect that he's going to make meaningful contact when he swings hard. You play him in the field and he's going to have a good body for it. That some of that is half the battle when you bring new guys into the program is acclimating them to this high level baseball. And when you're in good shape, obviously that takes some of those difficulties away. And that's where this kid is, from what I've been told.
Yeah. And I could be wrong, but I think, if I remember correctly, ACA made the 4A state title game in baseball this year. So they're definitely a very good program. I just thought I'd throw that in there if my memory serves me right.
Oh, I think Tuscaloosa is an underrated baseball high school baseball region, West Alabama. It's an underrated baseball area in the state of Alabama. So Kim, I'm with you. I love a good story. If it's a local kid playing on any Alabama team, I'll want the best for them anyways. It doesn't always pan out. It's hard to jump up into that big stage, but it's more fun when the local guys do well. Kim, why don't you outline for us the schedule for the weekend. Obviously, Alabama's playing at 3 today against UCF. If they win, it's going to be one time. If they lose, it's going to be the other time. And obviously, it's kind of dependent on the results of that Florida State and Stetson game that was 5-2 the last time we looked in the 7th inning. What's the schedule going to be for the weekend as they follow you at Kim Rankin 1 and at Real WB Miller and, of course, at BamaCentral.com?
Yeah, so obviously we're kind of waiting on that Florida State Stetson final to kind of see, who's going to play in the winner's bracket, who's going to play in the loser's bracket. But basically regionals is double elimination. So if Alabama loses tonight, they've still got a shot to play tomorrow. If I remember off the top of my head, the winners play at night and the losers play during the day. So they'll be playing basically right around 11-ish Central Time every day, Saturday, Sunday. And then the winner's bracket will play at night. So it'll be right around 5, 6-ish every night. And then if necessary, game 7 on Monday, probably at night due to it being a weeknight. But yeah, so double elimination, they'll kind of play. It looks like Florida State's going to hang on to this lead. I don't know the score right now, but assuming it's still 5-2 close to the end, then Florida State will ride the winner's bracket and Stetson will ride the loser's bracket. And like I said, you got to lose twice. So if something happens, maybe one swing of the bat, maybe cost Alabama tonight's game, they've still got a chance to at least come out of this regional. It will be a little more difficult, but still possible. It's not a one and done situation here.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit because you guys are Diamond experts. Obviously not covering softball every game, but watching it. Alabama softball losing to UCLA 4-1 yesterday in the opening game of the Women's College World Series. Had a little bit of a rain delay, and so you lost the game 1. Same sort of situation as double elimination. Alabama's taking on Duke tonight at 7, I believe. Katie Wyndham is going to be covering. 7 Eastern, 6 Central for us in God's time zone. 6 o'clock. So, look, very tough. Very, very tough to lose game 1 and win the whole dang thing. But we kind of knew Alabama was the lowest seed in the entire finals, in the entire Women's College World Series. What did you make? We'll start with you, Kim Rankin. What did you make of Alabama winning the regionals and beating Tennessee in Knoxville, and just the way they've kind of maybe maximized their potential in the last couple of weeks to get them here to Oklahoma City?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Alabama softball has done in the last 2-3 weeks is incredibly impressive. They had a very underwhelming regular season, first time. I don't know in how many years, but first time in a long time that they had fallen to under 500 in SEC play for the regular season, had some really, really tough losses and series losses during that stretch. But, the thing about softball and baseball, basically all the diamond sports, is that it doesn't really matter who the best team is. As long as you can get into a regional, it just depends on who gets hot at the right time. I mean, as long as you can squeak in, it's anybody's game at that point. And I think that's what Alabama softball has specifically done, is they just got hot at the right time. They had that home field advantage, which was controversial. Obviously, I don't think a lot of people thought that Alabama should have had a top 16 hosting spot, but they did get that. And I think that helped a lot with the momentum going into supers, and then just impressive ball in Knoxville. I know I personally thought they wouldn't get out of that super regional. I thought Tennessee was just a better program, and man, was I wrong. Dang, did they look impressive. So I think even if they lose tonight to Duke and get eliminated, it really just shows that they went farther than I think a lot of people gave them expectations were this year, and a lot of people gave them credit for this year. And I still think it's a good season if you can get to OKC. So yeah, they've definitely exceeded expectations in the postseason, but again, very underwhelming regular season. But like I said, it's just about who gets hot at the right time, and Alabama softball kind of clinged on to that, and that might be because Patrick Murphy and Alabama softball is a veteran in postseason play, so they probably just kind of know how that works. But yeah, very, very impressive postseason run for Team 28.
All right, Will. Alabama is tied 1-1. UCLA gets a double. Alabama walks a really hot batter, and then boom, you get a home run, and that's basically the end of the game. And that was the 6th inning, I believe, yesterday. So that was basically the end of the game. You had one more inning, but Alabama was out of chances at that point. In the 5th inning, Patrick Murphy sends a runner on a ball into the outfield. They got the 1 run to tie the game at 1-1. But basically, he pushed his luck a little bit. Got thrown out at home. They reviewed it. It was obviously out. What is your big takeaway from the game against UCLA? And then we'll lead into Duke. I mean, Duke is also, this is the first time that they're at the College World Series, and they have been a building, ascending program. So, look, if you're going to be playing anyone in an elimination game, you may as well be playing the other lowest seed in the tournament. What'd you make of yesterday's game? And let's talk about Duke.
Well, first off, to address your first point, I did think it was a bad send. Patrick Murphy rolling dice. He owned it in the post-game press conference. He said, you've got to go. I mean, they're playing really well right now, like Kim said. But one thing that you'll notice, and it was especially apparent in that game one in Knoxville, they're playing like a team that's got nothing to lose. And a lot of people feel like they're playing with house money regardless. I think you've seen that in some of the ways they played. I think you certainly saw it in that send yesterday. I wouldn't have done it, but then again, I haven't been a successful SEC head coach for nearly 3 decades, so make of that what you will. In terms of that big 6th inning, Kayla Beaver was great all day yesterday, and she had one mistake pitch. And you know what, that happens. But and then the postseason, when you place a premium on pitching, and everything has changed in that regard, and that's the game basically. Those mistake pitchers are going to come back to bite you. That's what happened. Alabama only had 3 outs to make up the difference. Couldn't get it done. Duke's a good team this year, and they beat Missouri in the Supers to get to the College World Series, obviously, like you said, for the first time in program history. But that was a Missouri team that, when Kim talks about getting hot at the right time, they did it. End up running through the SEC tournament, hosting a regional, getting the number 7 national seed, and they still fall to a Duke team, like you said, that's on the ascend. And they came out and threw the first punch at Oklahoma yesterday. This is a team that's not afraid of the moment. Not afraid of the stage, and obviously Alabama isn't either, having been there before. Duke doesn't have that. They can't say we've been here before, but both teams' backs are against the wall, and I've said this a lot. If you want to play with your back against the wall at all, you'd rather do it when the other team is too. That's the position these teams each find themselves in. It's a winnable game for either side. Same keys apply. You just got to make timely hits and pitch really well. Let your pitchers give your bats a chance.
All right, let's get us out of here on this, because I was going to hear from Matt Guzman from Inside the Spurs. What we're going to have a little bit of it sounds like a communication delay or error. That's no problem. Kim Rankin, you get the honors then, because I was going to talk about the NBA Finals with Matt Guzman, Inside the Spurs, our NBA guy. And people don't know you quite well yet. I mean, some do, but Kim Rankin's having a great week as her Boston Celtics have been resting and preparing for what now is the Dallas Mavericks. Is this the year, the first NBA championship since 2008 for the Boston Celtics? Give us just a couple of minutes on the NBA Finals, because we missed out on our friend Matt Guzman, and we'll all sign off and have a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for one, go Celtics. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a massive Boston sports fan across the board, but especially Boston Celtics fan. But no, I think it is the year. They've had success in recent years. Obviously, they had the finals trip in 2022, and really they've been a finals contending team since right around COVID. Well, actually, you could go as farther as like 2018. In 2018, they got one game away from going to the NBA Finals, and that was a crazy year. But I will omit that because I could talk about that for a while. So they've really been finals contending teams for a while, but I feel like every year there's just been something that's like not there or not clicking. The first couple of years, it was that they couldn't hold leads. They had absolutely no idea. They'd be up, 12, 13 points in like the end of the third, and then they lose the run in the fourth. And then it started to be leads in the third. They couldn't hold leads in the third the last couple of years. And I feel like there have been a lot of kind of issues they had. Obviously, Brad Stevens moved up from head coach to general manager. After the 2021 season, they brought in Ime Udoka, who got them to the finals, but then, left due to some off the field incidents. And then they hired Joe Mazzulla, who was a second-year head coach this year, first-year head coach last year. And they had success considering he was a 34-year-old first-year head coach. But, Brad Stevens has done such a good job in the general manager position. I mean, he's had some great trade acquisitions, great getting, free agents. One I really love was Al Horford. Al Horford was with us in 2016 through about 2019 and then left when the whole Kyrie Irving incident came up while he was on the Celtics. And Brad Stevens found a way to get him back. I didn't think anybody from that team would ever try to come back in free agency. Got him back, and he's been a huge, huge help. You get Chris Kristaps Porzingis in this year's offseason. You get Drew Holiday in this year's offseason, a guy who you almost got in 21 and kind of lost out on to the Bucks. So I just think they've done a great job making this kind of super team, and they're just so good. They don't ever really lose multiple games. I mean, they've been so dominant this year. They've only lost 2 games in the postseason in total. So I think it's their year. I think they've done a good job at just building a super team. I feel like Tatum and Brown is someone who has had injury history a lot. So he's usually been pretty hurt, and kind of everything fell on Jason Tatum. You didn't really have, 6 or 7 guys who were just dominant each game, but that's what they're having this year. I mean, every starter, Al Horford, Derek White, people coming off the bench, they're having massive games too. And they've just done such a good job at building this super team that has been really years in the making. I think it's their year. I think they're going to win it all. I'd probably say Celtics in 6, but I feel like they're going to hang banner 18 here in a couple weeks.
It's kind of now or never when you're not having to face a LeBron James or a Nikola Jokic or a Giannis Antetokounmpo, or you play an injured Jimmy Butler. There's been a lot of positive, and it's not a knock. You got to take advantage of positive circumstances, and lots of times when you have a championship win, some breaks go your way. So not a knock, but Boston, you got to take advantage of it right here. You're playing 5 seed, Luka and Kyrie, maybe not the best on the defensive side of the floor. One little thing.
It's the NBA, Joe. Come on.
What do you mean?
They're not going to play defense, Joe.
They play defense in the playoffs, though. In the playoffs.
I mean, yeah, that effort goes up a couple of ticks. I'm more just messing around. I mean, it feels to me like, I agree with Kim's prediction, but I think this series could go either way. I mean, Luka's absolutely on demon time right now. You guys see what he did to the Timberwolves, who were playing as well as anybody. Timberwolves. Yeah, the Timberwolves, who don't win like this, and they had an opportunity, and Luka just said no.
Are we a fan of a player? I mean, come on, Luka. He's been using I didn't say anything. I was speaking in Slovenian, which is such a convenient excuse. Do we like a player dropping MF bombs and calling names and taunt? I mean, he's letting it. And now look, off the air, I am known to let it fly here and there too, but he's letting it fly. Kim Rankin, are the Boston faithful going to take that laying down?
No, I mean, I like Luka. I think he's a really fun player. I like the trash talk. I like kind of, I think it's fun. I think it's the epitome of postseason ball, regardless of what sport it is. Because, a lot of people talk about the NBA in like the 80s, and that was before my time. I was born in 96. So I don't know what the 80s and 90s were like in the NBA, but I know a lot of people and people who kind of watched back then were like, oh man, these teams are so soft. They like each other off the court, things like that. And I feel like having someone like Luka who's going to, cuss somebody out in Slovenian is just so good for baseball or for basketball. And I think that's just, the postseason in him. But regardless of what team you root for, if you're just an NBA fan or basketball fan in general, there are a bunch of storylines with this team. Kyrie Irving obviously has a big history with the Boston Celtics. I will keep my opinion on that quiet for this show because we would go through the night. But Kyrie Irving facing the Boston Celtics, who he's not very well liked by the team. I think a couple players are still friends with him, but for the most part, the team, the players, the fans don't like him. So, and then obviously Kristaps Porzingis used to play for the Mavericks, so he'll be kind of facing his old team. And somebody's going to win a ring for the first time, whether it's Luka or Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. A superstar is going to win a ring for the first time. So I think it's going to be a very, very good series coming up just for basketball fans in general.
All right, when do we start? We're starting on Sunday, or are we starting on Monday?
June 6th, I think, is the game.
Oh, yeah, June 6th on Thursday. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's late this
y'all
year.
going to sit on your butts for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We're going to get out of here for the day because Kim and Will have a lot of work to get to do. They're starting their live updates very, very soon on BamaCentral.com. They're going to have all your baseball updates together on BamaCentral.com. Please, please, please follow Kim Rankin at KimRankin1. Follow Will Miller at RealWB Miller on the Twitter machines for both of those. They'll have all kinds of updates and insights for baseball. If there's any weather delays in Tallahassee, we pray that's not the case for my friends Will and Kim and for all the spectators. But if there are weather delays, you'll be able to find it right there on Bama Central and on those respective Twitter accounts. We'll get out of here for the day, and we'll have a great weekend. We hope everybody has a great weekend. We thank everybody for following us and watching us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter right there at Joe Gaither 6 or on the Bama Central YouTube channel. We thank everybody who subscribed, rated, or reviewed the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon. It's been a great week. We would thank all of our guests. We had, oh my gosh, a lot. Blake Byler, we had Will Miller, Kim Rankin, Katie Wyndham, we had Joey Van Zimmeren, Jacob Bain, and a lot of people from the Walsh Writing Network right here on the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central and BamaCentral.com.